Today, we are going to recap the plot of 2023 a mystery thriller movie, Death's Roulette. A young woman wakes up on the floor, her hands tied together. She sees a man using a statue to free himself. He cuts the rope and then helps her untie her hands. Gradually, the others wake up and realize they're in a fancy room in a huge house. They don't know each other or why they're here. The man who got free helps the others get untied one by one until all 7 are free. They look at each other, confused and wondering why they're in this strange place. The 7 captives find themselves trapped inside a room with a massive metal door, and when they look out the window, all they see is a steep cliff with a sheer drop. Sitting down, they attempt to gather their thoughts and make sense of their bewildering situation. The first person stands up and pours a glass of water, remarking that it's likely not poisoned because if their captors wanted to harm them, they probably would have done so already. He offers a glass to the stewardess and then asks the others if anyone can recall how they ended up here. It becomes apparent that they were all kidnapped while going about their everyday lives. As the group ponders why the man in the suit and tie suspects they might be held for ransom, an elderly man, Grandpa, speaks up with a chilling revelation. He shares that the kidnappers subjected him to hours of torture but never once inquired about money or sought any information from him. It appears their sole intention was to inflict suffering. Concerned, the man in the button-down shirt approaches Grandpa to inspect his condition. To his horror, he discovers that Grandpa's fingernails have all been cruelly torn off as part of the punishment. It dawns on them that their captors have motives far more sinister and sadistic than simple financial gain. In an attempt to find common ground and piece together their situation, they decide to introduce themselves to each other. The first person to speak is Lieutenant Simon Cruz, an investigator with the Mexico City Police Force. Next is a family consisting of the father, Esteban, and mother, Marta, who are successful businesspeople, accompanied by their daughter, Lupe, who works as a human rights lawyer. The man in the button-down shirt introduces himself as Armando, a surgeon. Following him is Teresa, the stewardess. Lastly, they learn the name of the old man, Jose, who simply mentions that he is retired. Suddenly, an old radio in the middle of the room crackles to life, displaying a chilling message. A voice on the speaker system announces that they've all been brought here to play a deadly game and proceeds to read off the game rules. They must select one member from their group to be sacrificed, and that person must agree willingly to be killed. However, volunteering is strictly prohibited. They are given just 1 hour to make this harrowing decision. If they can't come to a consensus or refuse to participate, they'll all face the same fatal fate. An alarm blares as a digital clock on the wall begins its ominous countdown, sending the captives into a state of panic and chaos as the horrifying game begins. Amidst the panic, the surgeon and stewardess frantically pound on the door, pleading to be let out. However, Marta tries to reassure them, stating that her influential connections will come to their rescue. Armando, concerned about the dwindling time, argues that they must make a sacrifice decision or face the grim consequence of all perishing. Teresa adds her voice to the conversation, asserting that the women in the group should be exempt from participation in this horrifying choice. Despite the argument for gender equality during this life or death situation, the men in the group remain steadfast in their belief in equality, especially in the context of this deadly game. The group finds themselves in a tense stalemate until Jose, the eldest among them, decides to break the silence. Jose suggests that they choose him as the sacrificial member because of his age. The idea gains favor among the group, primarily because it relieves them of the difficult decision. However, the human rights lawyer, Lupe, takes exception to this proposal. She inquires if Jose has a family, to which he responds that he lives alone. Despite the circumstances pointing to him as the obvious choice, Lupe passionately argues that his life holds just as much value as anyone else's, advocating for the principle that every life matters. The surgeon challenges Lupe to take his place if she truly believes in the equality of their lives. However, she suggests a different approach, deciding by a lottery. This method would make the decision less personal and arbitrary, although nobody is truly willing to leave their fate to chance. Each member of the group passionately argues their case, highlighting why they believe they deserve to live more than the others. Armando points out that his medical expertise saves dozens of lives every year, emphasizing the value of his contributions. Marta underscores her family's responsibility to thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on the jobs they provide. The old man, Jose, speaks up once more, suggesting that they simply have a vote and choose him as the sacrificial member. Lupe protests, but the others have made their decision, and the women thank him for his selfless sacrifice, viewing it as an opportunity to express some of his innermost thoughts before he departs to whatever comes next. In a heartfelt moment, Jose confesses that he's done things in his life that he deeply regrets. The cop leans in, curious about the specifics of Jose's confession. However, before any further discussion can take place, a trapdoor in the wall suddenly opens, and a blonde-haired man emerges, wielding a hunting rifle. He fires a single shot, hitting Jose in the head and ending his life instantly. The mysterious man then vanishes back into the wall. With one victim already lost, there are still 6 more to go. The voice on the radio comes back and says that Jose's sacrifice was pointless because he broke a rule. He volunteered to be killed, which is against the rules. So, the deadly game must go on. Now, they realize that the people who kidnapped them are very serious. To stay alive, they have to follow the rules of this horrifying game. The ominous countdown persists, marked by a blaring alarm, as the massive metal doors eerily swing open on their own. Simon takes the lead, proceeding cautiously down the hallway, and the rest of the group follows suit. Along their path, they pass disturbing paintings that send shivers down their spines. Eventually, they arrive at a balcony overlooking a parlor. In the center of this room is a letterboard with illuminated letters. As they explore further, Armando discovers a stack of envelopes, all labeled read. He opens the first one, revealing a card that outlines the rules for the next challenge. The group learns that they must answer a series of 9 questions, with each answer's first letter spelling out the name of their kidnapper. However, they are unaware that in the process, they will also be revealing some of their deepest and darkest secrets. Gathering in the center of the room, they embark on the challenging game. The first clue asks for the name of Esteban's company figurehead. Initially, Esteban hesitates to answer, but his wife, Marta, reluctantly reveals that the man's name is Pereira. The cop fills in the first section of the letterboard. They move on to the next question, which pertains to Teresa's secret addiction. The surgeon correctly deduces that the answer is amphetamines, based on her evident withdrawal symptoms. The third question unveils Lupe's dark secret: she falsified her high school diploma, revealing that she's not the academic achiever she claimed to be. And they reach the fourth question, which exposes Simon's partner, Lorenzo, for corruption. However, when they arrive at the fifth clue, the answer is particularly shocking for the family. It demands Marta's sister's name, which Lupe insists doesn't exist because her mother is an only child. Marta reluctantly admits that her sister's name was Ophelia but claims she died at a very young age before Lupe was born, which is why they never knew each other. The sixth clue reads Jose is a, and they complete it with the Spanish word for retiree. The seventh clue asks for Teresa's dealer's nickname, which they reveal as Elf. Finally, the eighth clue exposes Armando's secret of having contracted gonorrhea. As the group reaches the ninth and final clue, which seeks the name of Esteban's second lover, Marta reluctantly admits that her name was Alejandra, who also happened to be Esteban's secretary. Simon steps back from the board, and as they look at the first letters of each answer, they spell out the name Pablo Giga. Initially, this name doesn't seem to trigger any recognition among the group, leaving them puzzled and uncertain about the significance of this revelation. Turning their attention back to the letters on the board, Simon makes a crucial discovery. By replacing the J with a V, they unveil the true identity of their kidnapper, Pablo Vega. The puzzle is solved, but the pressing question remains: what connection do they all share with this man? Simon goes on to explain that Pablo Vega is a notorious murderer who fancies himself a hero. He has a gruesome reputation for kidnapping and torturing corrupt government officials. His favorite method involves forcing his victims to partake in his morbid games. Simon recounts a chilling incident where Pablo gutted a judge and compelled his family to play hangman using the judge's blood. During his time as a police officer, Simon had dedicated years to tracking down Pablo, but every time he got close, the elusive kidnapper would mysteriously slip away, leaving him frustrated and unable to bring him to justice. The group is becoming increasingly uneasy, as they start to acknowledge that they all have troubling ties to Pablo Vega, though they haven't yet discussed the details. He pleads with the man to listen to his plea. This outburst shocks the others, who inquire about what Armando is referring to. Reluctantly, Armando reveals that Pablo's mother, Patricia, had died in his operating room after being involved in a hit-and-run car accident, and explains that the woman's injuries were too severe for her to survive. However, this revelation prompts Teresa to speak up, her anger boiling over. She confesses that she was the one who had been driving the car that struck the woman. In a moment of panic, she fled from the scene. Overwhelmed with guilt, Teresa searched numerous hospitals until she found the injured woman. She insists that a nurse had informed her that the woman had only sustained leg fractures and should have survived. This revelation sparks a heated argument between Teresa and Armando. Amid the argument, Armando raises his hand and declares that he votes for Teresa to be killed as a form of punishment for her crime. Abruptly, a fortune-telling machine springs to life, as if it had been biding its time for the ideal moment to unveil the whole truth. The machine starts playing a recorded testimony from a nurse at the hospital. In her testimony, she explains that Armando had mishandled a routine surgery, despite repeated warnings from his team that he was performing it incorrectly. This negligence ultimately led to the unnecessary death of the woman. With this shocking revelation, the group is confronted with the grim reality of what truly happened, and their perceptions of the situation are turned upside down. Teresa raises her hand and votes for Armando, the doctor, to be killed. Esteban adds to the discussion, highlighting that there are only 6 of them in the group. He points out that his family of 3 has more voting power than any of the others because they won't vote for each other. This essentially leaves the remaining 3 members to decide among themselves who should be the one to face the grim outcome, despite the accusations of unfairness. Marta firmly refuses to turn against her husband, declaring her loyalty. However, Simon interjects, emphasizing that none of them are completely innocent, including the family. He insists on knowing what actions landed them on Pablo's list before he casts his vote. The other two members of the group agree with Simon's stance. Feeling cornered, Marta finally admits that Pablo's mother had worked as a servant in their household for a period before becoming pregnant and resigning. This revelation takes a more shocking turn when the doctor accuses Esteban of being the father, a claim that Esteban vehemently denies. Even Lupe begins to doubt her father. However, just when it appears that the situation is about to reach a breaking point, a metal door on the other side of the room swings open. The group pauses their conversation to investigate what lies beyond, with a little over 33 minutes remaining before their lives are threatened once more. The group proceeds down the eerie hallway and enters the next room, which turns out to be an art gallery filled with disturbing paintings. The voice on the radio instructs them to uncover the truth hidden in the details of these artworks. As the group starts examining the room, the countdown timer continues to tick away. Marta takes Esteban aside and whispers to him that if their darkest secret is revealed and they are compelled to choose someone to die, he must allow her to be the one sacrificed. Esteban, however, remains steadfast in his belief that they will all turn against each other before such a grim decision is reached. Meanwhile, Lupe takes the opportunity to speak with the stewardess. During their conversation, Lupe learns that the stewardess has a school-aged son, but due to her struggles with addiction, the child lives with his father. The stewardess expresses her concerns about not being able to provide a better future for her son, even if she manages to survive their current predicament. After their conversation, Lupe and the stewardess go their separate ways. Lupe quickly decides to inform her parents about the stewardess's child, seeing it as a potential bargaining chip in their desperate situation. Armando seizes a picture from the table and shows it to the others, unveiling a shocking revelation. The caption on the photo reads, "Mom with Uncle Esteban and Aunt Marta in Paris." In an instant, their carefully crafted facade unravels. Lupe comes to a startling realization that the woman in the picture is her Aunt Ofelia, which means she and Pablo are cousins. The parents, Esteban and Marta, are now faced with a dilemma as the group demands an explanation and presses for more details about their family secrets. Simon removes a painting from the wall, revealing a disturbing truth about Pablo's birthplace, a mental hospital. Marta finally admits that their elaborate charade is over. She goes on to explain that Ofelia, her older sister, had struggled with depression and psychosis throughout her life. Eventually, her father made the difficult decision to have her committed to a mental hospital. Marta explains that Ofelia, her sister, was getting better in the mental hospital until she got pregnant after an assault by a staff member. Despite the family's attempts to convince Ofelia not to keep the baby, she refused and died while giving birth to a baby boy with a birthmark on his arm. Marta, driven by her business ambitions, decided to leave the baby in the care of the hospital worker and move on with her life. The group is angry with Marta and her family, blaming them for abandoning Ofelia and the boy, believing that their actions led the boy to become a killer and set up this twisted game that has trapped them all. The surgeon turns to Simon and Teresa, inquiring if there's anything that could make them decide to sacrifice themselves. Both of them firmly respond with a no. He then addresses Esteban, explaining that since no one is willing to be sacrificed, they will all face death together, and the parents will have to watch their daughter being killed. However, the wealthy businesspeople, Esteban and Marta, have one last card to play. Marta approaches Teresa, acknowledging that she knows about Teresa's son and offering to buy him out. The offer is set at $1 million, ensuring a successful future for the boy, but with the condition that Teresa agrees to sacrifice herself so that the others can go free. It's a compelling proposition. Teresa firmly rejects the offer and rebuffs the wealthy couple's attempt to manipulate her. With no other options left, Simon raises his hand, indicating his vote to sacrifice Esteban. The rest of the group follows suit, agreeing to Esteban's sacrifice. However, Marta refuses to accept this and insists that they choose her instead. The group changes their vote accordingly. As only 11 minutes remain on the countdown, Marta kneels in the center of the room, pleading for Pablo to kill her. Surprisingly, the timer stops, and an alarm begins to sound. Strangely, no one arrives to carry out the execution. Another metal door slides open, prompting the group to move through it. The family, with Marta in tow, follows closely behind the rest of the group as they ascend a staircase to another balcony. From there, they peer into a lavish dining room adorned with an extravagant feast on the table. Each seat at the table is designated for one of them, and they reluctantly take their places, anticipating an uncomfortable dinner. Teresa discovers a pill container containing her drug of choice, and the surgeon advises her to take it to prevent withdrawal symptoms. However, after giving it some thought, Teresa declines the pills. The surgeon, instead, pours himself a glass of wine and urges the group to start eating so they won't face their fate with empty stomachs. Lupe points out that they're all still alive, and the timer has stopped. She wonders if Pablo has forgiven them. However, the doctor remains skeptical. After all, would Pablo really kidnap them, murder a man in front of their eyes, only to feed them a delicious meal and send them home? The conversation then turns to Jose, and Simon finally realizes that he was the one who assaulted Ofelia, impregnating her with the boy. Just then, he reaches for another bite to eat and cuts his finger on something hidden inside the food. The doctor investigates and finds a massive hunting knife with the message "Do it yourself" hanging from its handle. The alarm rings, and the timer begins counting down again. Armando stands up, clutching the knife, and everyone else quickly backs away, alarmed. He argues that they should kill Marta, assuring them he can do it with minimal suffering due to his surgical skills. As he lunges towards Marta, Esteban intervenes, smashing a glass over Armando's head and forcing the blade into his own stomach. Armando falls to the ground, and despite Simon's efforts to assist, he resigns to his fate, recognizing this as their best chance to escape. The group decides to sacrifice Armando, and he willingly accepts his fate to save the others. Esteban takes the knife and, following Armando's instructions, stabs him in the heart, killing him. With 2 victims down and 5 more to go, the timer stops with just a fraction of a second left. A door on the other side of the room slides open, and Simon takes the knife from Armando's chest, leading the survivors towards it. Down the hall, they proceed up a winding flight of stairs and finally see the light of day. However, they discover themselves in the middle of an enormous hedge maze. Continuing forward, Esteban suggests to his family that they should separate from the group, but they don't get very far before Lupe begins to panic. She insists that they turn around and go back. Meanwhile, 2 of Pablo's accomplices are closely tailing the family. The woman among them opens fire with her AK as soon as she spots the family, forcing them to flee for their lives. In the chaos, Teresa takes off running, leaving Simon behind. Teresa eventually reaches a wooden bridge, where she pauses to catch her breath. She opens her pill container but accidentally drops it through the gaps in the bridge and into the dirt below. Just in time, she hides under the bridge as the woman with the AK approaches and crosses overhead. Once the coast is clear, Teresa continues running until she finds an exit, stepping out to freedom. However, her newfound freedom takes an unexpected turn when she is comically run over by a speeding pickup truck. The surprising twist comes when she realizes that the driver of the truck is none other than her fellow captive, Simon, also known as Pablo Vega. She pleads with him to spare her, but Pablo simply gets back in his car. With 3 victims down, the killer is revealed, and 3 more are left to go. Meanwhile, the family continues to navigate through the maze, evading the pursuit of the blonde man with the rifle. They quickly turn a corner and hide, allowing the man to pass by before crawling through a hole in the hedge and making their way towards a boat parked near the beach. They manage to climb aboard the boat, but just as they're about to set off, Pablo, who they still believe is Simon, swims up behind them and boards the boat. Pablo removes his jacket, revealing the scar on his arm. He then draws 2 guns, pointing them directly at their heads. Pablo orders the man and woman to move to one side of the boat. He then hands them a revolver with 1 bullet in the chamber, demanding that they play a deadly game of Russian roulette. He threatens to kill their daughter if they refuse to comply. Marta is the first to take her turn, but she can't bring herself to pull the trigger. In response, Pablo decides to reveal a horrifying secret. He discloses that Esteban didn't actually have an affair with his secretary. Instead, Esteban was a serial abuser of Lupe's young classmates, including his own daughter. Even more shocking, Marta was aware of her husband's heinous actions all along and chose to turn a blind eye to them, making her just as guilty. Pablo hands the revolver to Esteban, who, without hesitation, pulls the trigger. Luckily for him, the chamber is empty. Now, it's Marta's turn once more. However, just as she's about to take her turn, the 2 accomplices from earlier arrive, walking down the beach. Pablo instructs Lupe to signal to them, indicating that everything is under control. It's then revealed that Lupe has been part of this twisted plan from the beginning. Lupe hesitates, unable to shoot her father. In response, Pablo takes his own pistol and shoots Esteban in the head, killing him instantly. With that, 4 victims have now met their demise, leaving only 2 survivors. Pablo returns to the mansion with Marta, where he cruelly straps her to a table and subjects her to electric shock therapy. Meanwhile, his accomplice heads out to the cliff and begins digging 5 graves. Back in the room where their horrifying ordeal began, Pablo and Lupe gaze out over the sunset, their twisted revenge finally fulfilled.